Hello, we are here with Meghan Dibble, who will be teaching us about the business of studio teaching. Many of our participants are not able to join in person, so this will be a video for those of you who are going to be watching it later. I hope you enjoy this symposium. Welcome, Meghan.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here this morning and excited to tell you all the things that I know about streamlining your business, but also the things that I don't do well because, we are all creative people. We are musicians. We go out there, we are artists, and then we start a business. And it's kind of like, I want to be an artist. Don't necessarily want to run a business. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things that I am pretty good at, some of the things that I've learned, and some of the things that I still struggle with, so that you know that if you just do a little bit at a time, you keep staying curious about how to improve your business, you too can improve and streamline to make things much more easy, efficient, and clear for your students. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Of course, I can't find what I'm looking for, so hold on just a second.
Can I ask one question? Just at the
Oh,
get-go?
of course.
What percentage of your time do you spend on the business side, and what percentage do you spend on the musical creative side of your day?
So let me start by saying in the past, I spent very little time on the administrative side. And that is a big mistake. When we think about the studio teaching time, we think me, and many others, we think about the client facing time. So like, let's say I have a lesson at 10 a.m. and it's going to go to 10:45. That's what I think about, 10 to 10:45. For every 40 to 45-minute lesson that I teach, I have an extra 15 minutes I have learned that I need to set aside for the business end. And that could include everything from like attendance marking, invoicing, creating materials for that student. And there are some lessons where it only takes 5 minutes. But if I block that 15 minutes aside in my mind, if I have, 3 lessons or 4 lessons a week, I know I need an extra hour to do the administrative side. So it really depends on how many students you have and how much time you need in order to do the tasks.
Okay.
And so this talk is going to be really about how to make that amount of time less, more efficient, make it more streamlined.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for asking. All right, I think I have found what I'm looking for. And hopefully you can see my slides.
I can see them just fine.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So it says the business of studio teaching, streamlining, scheduling, billing, and policies. And the reason why I've included policies in there at the end is because if you have your policies well set, it kind of covers a lot of what might come up and be challenges with students and parents. And it forces you in your own mind to get clear about your workflows. So we're going to start today with a welcome. I wasn't sure being on Zoom, and of course, I belong to my own singing teacher association. I know how sometimes the timing of seminars or gatherings is not won't work schedule-wise. And so I'm really glad this is being recorded. And since it's just me and Kathleen talking, we are going to make this more of a lecture style. However, my intention is that the next hour and a half to 2 hours is actually like a work session. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but probably about 10 years ago, I joined a consultation group with a bunch of other voice teachers. And we found that when we scheduled a time, an hour, and we were on Zoom, and there was a work session when we were all working kind of together, but independently, I actually got a lot more stuff done. And so let's consider this time together as a co-working time. So there are going to be times during the talk when I say, okay, now let's pause the video, go get out your paper or your digital notebook, and let's go ahead and try this exercise for ourselves. And right here is our outline for today's talk. We're going to talk about streamlining. What does it mean? Why should we do it? What are some pain points or obstacles that we might come up with? Then we're going to talk about the stages of business growth. And so what I want you to consider is where you are in your business. Have you just started your teaching studio? Have you been doing it for 10 years? Are you like me, teaching for almost 30 years, which is kind of insane? I'm still learning so much about running a business. What are some resistances that we have for change? It is hard, especially after you've been teaching for several years or decades, to think about revamping, but actually we have to do it. And so we'll talk about some ways that we resist that, and then some ways that we can overcome, some strategies for overcoming that. Then we'll talk about some streamlining tools that I use and some that I don't, but I know other people like. A lot of them are, for pay, but we have to realize that our time is precious. And sometimes paying a service to do some of the administrative work for us actually saves us money and time in the long run. So we'll talk about my experience with some of those. And if we were all together, I would ask you your experience and some of the technologies that you use, because I think together, if we can collaborate on this, we will all be better business people. We will all be lifted up and we will all be more successful. And then we're going to write our studio policies. Let's say you already have studio policies. Great. Let's review them and see what things we might add, what things we might change or adjust, and what things are not really necessary. And then we will wrap up. Okay. I would like to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Meghan Dibble, as you heard, and I am a singing teacher. I also teach beginning piano, and I did this many years in person. I started teaching during my senior year of undergrad under the advice and advisement of one of the voice teachers, and I continued through grad school and ever since. And I come from a long line of teachers. Both my parents are teachers, and I was inspired to teach. I just feel like it's kind of in my DNA, but really, I love to perform. I just love practicing for a performance. I don't love practicing when I don't have a performance. So that's something I struggle with. But when I have a performance, I love working it up. And I found that even though I went to college, my degree was in liberal studies so that I could teach high school, I really loved vocal performance. And so I kind of have married those two things. What I didn't do any training in is business. And I will say that the first 20 years of me teaching and running my studio business, and I taught exclusively in person, I was a hot mess. My students had to remind me to bill them. I was using like a book paper calendar up until even 10 years ago. And I had to write things down, but I would forget to write them down, or I wouldn't have my book and I would double book. And if there's a mistake, I have done it. I didn't have studio policies. I didn't have cancellation policies. I was just so willy-nilly, and I wasted so much time, and I wasn't charging enough. I didn't know how to set my rates. And we all know as creative artists that making sure that you can pay your rent, buy food, buy a car, pay for transit is really important. And so whether you're here listening to this talk and you're just starting out, or you have been doing this for a long time. I hope that some of my ideas that I bring to the table today, they're not even my ideas, the ideas that I have curated for you, will help inspire you to make everything more efficient so that you have a better work-life balance and get to choose the things that you want to do. That brings me to what I've been doing for the last 5 years. My wife and I decided to move to the country, buy 10 acres, and put a cow on it. And we have been kind of on the vegetarian, vegan, animal minded kind of border for the last 10 or 15 years. And we took the plunge 5 years ago when we bought a 60-acre ranch and not only put one cow on it, but 180 animals. In the last 5 years, we have helped to rescue and rehome and save over 850 animals. And we don't have training. I'm a musician. My wife is an immigration lawyer. We just deep dive. First home, never lived in the country. So I have been in a deep state of learning for the last 5 years. And when we moved up here, COVID hit. And even though I was planning on moving my studio online, I got to do it immediately. And since then, and since starting a nonprofit to help support our animal rescue efforts, I have had to get very serious about business. And a lot of the business kind of motivation and investigation and deep dive into that has actually been to support my nonprofit. Now, I joined about 10 years ago, I joined a group of like-minded voice teachers who all needed help with business, and it's called the Speak Easy Cooperative. And at the beginning, when I first heard it, I could not believe that joining this group was going to cost me $50 a month. And I tell you, it has been so eye-opening. All the ideas that I was trying to apply to my voice teaching business, I directly applied to our nonprofit organization. And because the nonprofit needs some money to exist, I have been deeply motivated, not just for myself, but for all the animals in my care to get really serious about it. Okay, that's why I'm here. When I was teaching at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, Jennifer Ellis and I taught in the same department, professional development department. And I joined that department in addition to the voice teaching department because they needed someone to teach the students a business 101 class. And I'm like, well, I know something about that. And it really forced me to get organized. And because I want to walk the talk, it also helped me improve my business. The 7-week course for the San Francisco Conservatory of Music students was basically a workshop to write a business plan. And I want to encourage you that if you have not written a business plan, get with a business coach. I have a recommendation at the end of the talk, not me, somebody who knows way more than me, to get a business plan and get your business kind of back in order. Okay. Look at this slide. My first question is emoji of the day. Now, Kathleen, if you want to participate, you might have to find where the emojis are on your Zoom. They're not actually that easy to find. Or yeah, actually, I think there is the little thing somewhere on your screen that will show your emojis. You can put them in the chat. So emoji of the day, this was my kind of icebreaker if we were going to have a bunch of people. In 5 to 6 emojis, I would like you to tell me how your weekend is going. And I will share mine. First of all, I've been a goofball lately. I've been playing a lot with the animals, cows, pigs, chickens. I've also been cleaning up a lot of their poop because that's a big chore around here. And I'm currently preparing for a Mozart mass. And I'm really excited about that. In 2 weeks, I'll be singing the alto soloist. And because it's a community chorus, I get to also sing all the alto choral parts. So I'm the section leader and the alto soloist. So I'm pulling double duty, and it is a joy. Kathleen, are you going to put some emojis in the chat so we can see how your weekend has been going out there in Spain? Oh my goodness, I see a superhero. Pretty great. Everyone, please it's really good. I love that. I can just imagine what a superhero you've been, probably to your family and your students, and also setting up this Zoom. Thank you so much for doing this. You're muted right now. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, no, it takes a long time for me to find the emojis, so that's about all I'll put. Yeah, I got to play Hans Zimmer this weekend, so I got to play, Wonder Woman and Batman and other things. So that was fun.
So fun. I love that. And I'm also going to imagine you being like a real super person
Okay.
too. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. So the next question I would ask you if you were joining me in person is, we have to consider what kind of studio you have. For me, I teach online. I teach one-on-one lessons. And I teach mostly musical theater teens. And I love teaching teens, especially if they're super emo and have these kind of like, teenage angst. It's like really my favorite thing. I also have a couple of classical students and singer-songwriter students, which is really fun to figure out how much of their brain they need to put towards singing and how much of their brain they need to put towards their piano or their guitar, depending on what they do. And I currently have one black metal singer. And I have, in addition to all the deep learning I'm doing in other areas, now I've done some deep learning into screaming, growling, and how to make that as healthy as possible so he can continue doing his music. So I kind of had a wide range. Oh, and I have some piano students. So you might also teach one-on-one lessons or group lessons. You might teach in person or online. You might do classical. As string teachers, you might do some other kind of contemporary type music. I know Bridgerton has really upped the awareness around contemporary music done with like string quartets and octets, which is super cool because that just that helps excite people about taking instruments. Maybe you have a multi-teacher studio. Maybe you run a studio and have a bunch of teachers under you that are taking on clients. Maybe your students are college bound, or maybe they want to be in a community orchestra. Maybe they're emerging professionals, or they're adults who took lessons as kids and they want to come back and play some more. Whatever your studio is like, all of these principles that we'll talk about today will apply in some way. And I really encourage you to really think open-mindedly and imagine that your studio and your teaching can have a more open, collaborative feel for greater success. I think a lot of us, and I've spoken more with voice teachers, but at the conservatory, everyone who took my class was a different instrument, right? So we got to troubleshoot where to teach, what instruments to have on hand, what the space needs to look like, what technologies they need. Together, we are better. And so it's very easy to be in kind of a scarcity mindset where there's not enough, but there are so many people in the world that we just need to have a more open heart, a more open mind to find our students. Okay, let's talk about streamlining. I know that this topic is not the most exciting topic on the planet, but I think it's really useful and really helpful because when we talk about streamlining, we're talking about greater efficiency, better consistency, and we get to focus more on our pedagogy. One thing that young teachers get to learn, have an opportunity to learn, is that having skills as a musician, as an artist, does not necessarily mean that they have skills as a teacher. And pedagogy is its whole own science. The science of teaching strings, of teaching piano, of teaching voice, anything has its own best practices, its own ideals. And so when we're talking about streamlining business, it's neither one of those. It's its third category. It's really figuring out, how can we save time and reduce our manual tasks? How can we ensure a uniform experience for our students and their parents? And how can we allow more time for creative work and spend less time on administrative tasks? What are some of our pain points or challenges that we have? We might find that we have overlapping tasks. We might find that the procedures in place that we have for the business side of our teaching are unclear and maybe they're time consuming. Here's some questions I want you to ask yourself. Like, where do you find yourself spending the most time? What tasks feel repetitive or frustrating? So here's a little yellow star. This is a moment, if you dare, to pause the video and really ask yourself, where do you find yourself spending the most time? Is it scheduling, responding to emails, avoiding responding to emails, talking to people on the phone? Uh, what tasks feel repetitive or frustrating? Do you find yourself typing out the same "thanks for inquiring" about strings lessons, violin lessons, viola lessons? You can find out more information on my website. You can sign up for lessons here. Let's find a time. Let me open, like you were me before, let me open my paper calendar and find a time. What feels frustrating? Do you have tasks that are overlapping, unclear for your students? They don't know where to cancel, how to reschedule. They don't know if they can cancel. Maybe there's a cancellation policy in your mind, but they don't know about it. And then where do you spend the most time? Now, one of the things that was very frustrating for me was scheduling and rescheduling appointments. And I would get an email, we would send texts, we'd go back and forth. They didn't know my availability, I didn't know their availability. And so what I ended up doing is just spending so much time going back and forth. And if they had to cancel, it was so hard and frustrating to figure out, how can I fit somebody else in there? Can somebody switch end of the school year, like right now, or maybe for me 6 weeks ago, figuring out how all the students can fit into my schedule, especially those that have been with me for years? It's always a puzzle. So one way that I have fixed that is by getting an online schedule where I just put in my schedule and people can sign up. And those people that I already know and they've continued through the summer, I just already populate. One way that we can figure out what we're doing is, or what we need to do, is by simplifying by assessing our current SOPs. Now, every time I see SOP, I'm like, what does that mean? And basically, what that means is standard operating procedures. What a boring business terminology, SOPs. But assessing your operating procedures may not be sexy and exciting, but it is super necessary. This is not a picture of my Post-it note board, But once upon a time, it could have been. I would have post-it notes on my monitor, all over my desk, on my piano, on my music stand, so that I could remember everything that I needed to do. And so, what I want to recommend or suggest is that you think about kind of checklists for onboarding new students, or how do you move from an inquiry to where that student actually takes a lesson, and then once they've taken that lesson, what are the things that need to happen after that? If you can spend an hour of your time really thinking through from your student's point of view, what needs to happen or what would help them feel comfortable and safe and confident in what you're offering, what would that look like? Now, this says flow charts and or checklists. I have both. I am a very visual person. I really don't enjoy writing. I do it, but I don't like it. And so drawing bullet points or using pictures like a flow chart to kind of see what is my process can be really helpful. So, I might go from inquiry to responding to the initial email, text, or however they contact me, to scheduling, to sending them my policies, to then having the first lesson and then having a follow-up email. That would be maybe my flow chart or checklist, if you prefer it that way, for onboarding. And then what you should do is ask your students, the ones that have been with you for a while, hey, I'm going to start this kind of flow. How does this feel to you from your point of view? Does this make sense? I have a student who's been with me for about 8 years, an avocational student. She's great. She just wants to sing and find her joy. And she loves trying things out. Hey, I'm going to do a new process. You want to be the first one to try it out? And she always gives me feedback. And it's so useful and helpful. And then how can you analyze if your current, what are your metrics for making sure that your standard operating procedures actually work or are efficient? So you might think that, well, right now I spend about 8 hours a week on administrative tasks. How can we get that down to 6 or 4? Right? Those would be some of your performance matrix. Okay. I'd ask if there were any questions. What do you think, Kathleen? Are you going to jump in?
I think it's all pretty clear for now.
Great. Okay, yeah, perfect. And anytime, Kathleen, you think that there's something confusing or you want to go over, please stop me anytime. I love collaborating and working back and forth.
Okay.
I can also talk a lot too, so don't worry.
No problem. That's what this is for.
Okay, cool. All right. So now that we know why should we streamline, what are some of the problems, how can we assess our current SOPs? Here are some strategies. Simplify and automate. One of my challenges, especially as a new teacher, was I was very resistant to just throwing money at the problem. I lived many years kind of hand to mouth, right? Like every dollar I brought in went out that month. And so to spend money on a scheduling software seemed like not appropriate. And it might not be appropriate, right? But one thing that we can all do is make use of some free tools. We'll talk more about those free tools later on in the talk. But for right now, I can say that, using scheduling software, even Google, and I'm here to tell you that Google now has a new feature, Google Calendar has a new feature where you can show your availability and students can populate when they want to go in, and it's totally free. If you have a Google account, if you're not Google adverse, and I know some of you are, if you're not Google adverse, they have a new scheduling program. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. Automated reminders. We all use email. And we can use mail programs either that come on our computers, whether you're an Apple user or a PC user, or an online calendar to schedule automatic reminders. And think about what online payment tools we have. If you have online payment tools, you might be using Venmo. At the end of that lesson, or at the beginning of the lesson, or at the beginning of the week, or at the end of the month, you can send out a little payment reminder. Hey, can't wait to get your Venmo, can't wait to get your PayPal, and you can actually send your invoices that way. We'll talk about some of those. The other idea I have here is templates, right? So how many years did I spend writing fresh emails for every lesson inquiry? You can have like your standard boilerplate block text. This is who I am. This is why you should study with me. This is how you sign up for lessons. Here are my studio policies already typed out. It could be in a document. You just cut, paste it, and then the first paragraph can be personalized to the inquiry. So having templates like that, having a sheet that teaches your students how to appropriately set up their Zoom, how to say, hey, the day before our lesson, make sure your Zoom is updated. Sometimes those updates can take 20 minutes. For me, I teach 40-minute lessons only, and that's half a lesson right there, waiting for them to update their Zoom. So having templates like that automatically can be just so time saving. Okay. What about communication? Now, the first time I received an inquiry for lessons over text from a parent, I was shocked. I mean, I've been teaching for 30 years. We didn't even have texting or like the kind of email situation we have right now. And so getting my first text like, "Hey, I'm a friend of so and so. I hear you teach lessons. Tell me more." I'm like, "You are texting me right now?" Well, guess what? I love it. I think it's so, please call me. Please text me. Please email me. I would love to teach your kid or you or your friend. So really figuring out the ways that you prefer to be contacted is really important. All these different ways of communicating, though, how do we centralize that information? It's pretty challenging, and it's something that I still struggle with. Oh, yeah. This is where I just remind you that I am not perfect, that I have some answers. I have a lot of information. And even though I apply a lot of these tools, I still struggle with some. And this is one that I struggle with. Remembering, did they contact me by email first? Do I have their phone number? Having a document of sorts right now, I'm just using like Google Docs. Having a document for every inquiry, especially if it goes to having scheduling their first lesson, that has their address, their email, their phone number, whether they contacted me through social media, like how did they find out about me? Do they have a connection with somebody else in my studio? Having all of that information in a centralized location so that I can always go right back to knowing who they are, especially in the beginning of getting to know them. So important. So right now I use a Google Doc for that. It's also the same Google Doc that below all that initial information, I start writing their lesson plans. And I am a big believer in lesson plans. I remember I would go to my lessons, my college voice teacher lessons, and they'd be like, cool, what do you want to work on? They did not have like a lesson plan on the piano for me. They did, you know what I mean? They just kind of knew. And I thought, ooh, that's so cool. They are like, they know their stuff so well. They don't need a lesson plan. Now that I've been a college professor, and I come from a long line, as I said, of teachers, lesson plans, I can't advocate enough. I don't always stick to them, but I always have a plan because you know what? Our students are really important, and it's super important to me that they have, like, I keep track of a metric of their progress, and I can't do that without a plan and this document. Having clear policies, which we will work on very soon, is also really important because that's part of how we communicate who we are and our values and our ideals. And those for me have shifted over time. I used to be very much like, I don't want to see you if you're sick. And I would say, you can let me know ahead, no problem. I won't get paid because if I get sick, I can't sing, right? So that was my initial thing. But you know what? Then I'd lose money and then I'd be short at the end of the month. It was not good. So I had to figure out a way that if they were sick, they couldn't come in. And I don't want to offer makeup lessons. That's just for me. If you ever want to know more about why I don't do makeup lessons, call me. My number will be at the end of the slides. I do a makeup lesson. I record a lesson. It is useful and they're supposed to do it at home. And then I have a follow-up of that lesson in their next session. And if they don't do it, I just do it then. That way they have a useful lesson. I don't have to do a makeup. They get their value for their money and it's still really useful. And if you want more information about that, give me a call. Okay, having clear policies. That's just an example why having clear policies is really important. What are your values around cancellations? What are your values around makeup? There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. Actually, I should say they're all right answers, but there's no wrong answer. However you want to make it happen, I support you 100%, and you just need to make sure that it's clear. How can we refine our admin tasks? How can we streamline our billing and organize records? I will admit, billing is terrible. I love getting paid, but I hate asking for money. It's really hard for me. It's really hard for me to raise my rates. Yeah, I might talk about it later, but it's something I still struggle with. And so, streamlining my billing has been really necessary. And so for me, and so I'll tell you where I've struggled and all the mistakes I've made. And maybe you can get some ideas and maybe you can relate to some of the things that I experience. And then reviewing and updating your standard operating procedures. Now, I would like you to take a moment and consider what strategies you're already using. Do you have an online scheduler? Which one? And how much are you paying every month for that? What templates do you have? Why don't you take a minute, if you have a piece of paper or a digital notebook, write down a couple places, just take a couple minutes, write out what templates you have right now that you use, and which ones you're starting to think maybe you might need. What tools like online billing or online scheduling do you currently use? What are some ways that it works really well? And what are some ways that it's not working? In the Speakeasy Cooperative, the group that I belong to that helps studio teachers consult their business side of things, a lot of people don't like Acuity. They prefer my music staff or Duet. I happen to really like Acuity, as do many others. And so that's what I use. But I can see that there are pros and cons to both of those programs. So where are your strategies helping or lacking? And what strategies might you want to start using? Okay. So we've talked about why, what are the challenges, what are some of the strategies? Here's some advice about how to implement, adopt, and maintain those strategies. Nothing has to be 100%, right? Implement changes gradually, right? Start with a couple of students. Start with your family members. The number of times I've had my wife sign up for a lesson just so we can go through the process, I've lost count, because every now and then I'll just kind of change it out and see. And she's kind of my test person, or my brother and brothers and sister, or my mom even. I've roped her in. So find people that you trust, a colleague even, and try some of these changes. Do some pilot testing and see what works. And then you can send it out to some of your long-term students and just say, hey, I'm trying this new thing out. I'd love some feedback. You might have to provide some training and support. I went way wrong with Acuity in this. I thought Acuity, the program, was pretty self-explanatory. It was very easy for me, but I'm very like tech-minded. I'm not terrible at that kind of stuff. And so I didn't realize I needed to train the parents how to create an account and pay for their lessons online. And I made a huge mistake in that. And now when I have new people, I train them on how to sign up for Acuity. I tell them how to create an account, how do they pay for lessons, what to expect, how to find their lesson type, and I offer them some resources until it seems like they've got it. Fostering a positive attitude. You know, we all, as humans, have a lot of resistance to change. Our brains are wired as predictors. Our brains are very happy when they have things that are predictable and make sense and are categorized. We love that. And when we start making changes that are outside our comfort zone, our brain kind of, gets into a spin. And so thinking and reminding yourself, and we'll talk about this when we talk about why there's resistance to change after in a little bit, but thinking about the benefits of why the changes are happening and really forcing yourself to really try to stay positive and try to see the light at the end of the tunnel is really important. And just saying, this is hard, but it won't be hard forever. It's just temporary. And then monitor and adjust any changes that you make to the back end of your business. We're gonna talk about growth, stages of business growth in a minute, but I want to go back to Kathleen, your question at the very beginning. How long do you spend on administrative tasks? And I'll say about 10 years ago, I tried to spend as little time as possible. And it wasn't until I joined this group that I really realized I needed to set aside, and at the time when I started doing this, I set aside an hour a week per student. And when I did that, everything got under control. And I had to incorporate that hour per student into my lesson rate. So when I see a student client-facing time, and let's say that's 40 minutes, I have in my mind a price that I want to charge that student. And then I think about the time I'm going to spend outside of that 40 minutes on their administrative tasks. And I think I need to get paid for that entire time. And so that's one of the factors when it comes to setting rates. Now, I have taken a couple of awesome classes on how to set our lesson rates. This might be a future seminar. And Michelle, who I'm going to recommend at the end of this talk, gives an amazing seminar on setting lesson rates and how to really make sure that you are charging what makes sense for your life and for your ideal client. Okay. Where are you in your growth? Maybe you're just starting up, right? Some characteristics of a startup or a new studio. For some of you, you might have to think back in the past of what that was like when you first started teaching. You had a vision of what that studio would be like. Hopefully you did some planning. If you were me, the planning consisted on where can I have my lessons and how do I get some students? And that was about it. Hopefully you're setting some foundations, like streamlining some of the administrative tasks and knowing that there's going to be kind of a learning curve. Maybe your lesson rates are too high for your community. Maybe they're too low for your community. Maybe your process for onboarding students is not thorough enough. Maybe you haven't found really, and you don't know who your ideal client is. For those of you that this term might be new or you haven't done a deep dive in ideal client, this is a student who, number one, you love to work with. They love to work with you, and they don't mind at all paying your rate, and they will recommend you to other people. Who is that person for you? Some of the challenges that new studios have would be finding students, dealing with all the finances, and then time management. And some strategies I can recommend are networking. One of the things I always encourage people to do are exactly what's happening in this professional group. Networking, sharing experiences with your fellow teachers. We don't have to be in competition with each other. We can really lift each other up and be in community and be better teachers and inspire future musicians. Music is it's kind of a luxury, right? People are going to pay their rent. They're going to, pay for education. They're going to buy their food. They're going to, maybe do something, buy clothes, pay their utilities before they take music lessons. But music is so enriching and creates such a better life, not just for the individual, but for the community and the society around us. And so making sure that we are networking, marketing, remaining flexible in the ways that stretch our comfort, but are still within our values. All those things are really important. I went to a business 101 class once. It was a free seminar put on by Theater Bay Area, which is really for like actors and directors and musicians in the San Francisco Bay Area, near where I live. And one of the things he talked about, and I'd never heard this before, but that you have a startup, you have a growing period, you have a mature period, and then you have to renew or decline. And I was in that kind of mature area when I took the class. And I very quickly from that moment got into you better renew or decline. And it's kind of like you had to reinvent. And I was so stuck. And like, what can I do to reinvigorate? How can I find some more students? All my students were graduating high school, going off to college. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have like 10 openings. And so how do I renew a decade, the way people communicate, the way people find out about you, it all changes in a decade. The technology changes. I mean, a perfect example, this whole like chat GPT AI stuff. It's like a brave new world out there. And so as you go through the cycle of growth, we're going to see kind of where you are. So if you're a startup, that's what we're talking about right now. The next thing is growth. So you start up, you've started teaching, you've started your studio, now you're just adding students. If you are a multi-teacher studio, you're going to have to figure out how to fill all those teachers' schedules. If you're a solo practitioner, you got to fill how full do you want your studio? How can you expand your community reach? How can you increase your revenue? And how can you develop systems to keep up with that? There have been many times when I've had a waiting list. It's a really great problem to have. And so right now I am in a startup position again. I've been focusing so much on my animal sanctuary and that startup, the nonprofit startup, that now I get to come back to the voice teaching piano studio and start doing that. So I am with you all right in it, doing it. Some of the challenges is, as you grow and you get busier, how do you maintain quality? If you have other teachers under you or people helping you or collaborating with others, how do you manage that? And then how do you manage your cash flow? Maybe you're renting a space. Maybe you're teaching in your home. Maybe you're teaching online. How do you make sure that you can pay for all the technologies that you need and improve the experience for your student? Some strategies for that are doing what you're doing right now, a little bit of professional development, attending your professional organizations seminars. How do you do outreach? Are you still performing? Do you do master classes? Can you go into the high schools to offer a seminar in something that you feel comfortable with? And then how efficient can you be? This is really important as you're growing. You really don't want to be bogged down by too much administrative time, but you do need to be allowing for some of that. And then when your studio is finally in its maturity phase, some characteristics are stability. You know, your student attrition, or as they leave, you have just that number coming in, having a small wait list is really great. And then your reputation starts to improve, word of mouth. And then when we're talking about things like consolidation, we're talking about like focusing on refining your processes and maintaining your high standards. Some challenges are sometimes we get stuck in this position. So we're not really innovating very much. We're very comfortable. And our brain, as I said before, loves to be comfortable. And so it's really going to resist that change. You might feel like, oh, I have some competition and start feeling a little bit of a scarcity mindset. Oh no, somebody else is teaching and they're new and exciting. And I'm just kind of like maybe starting to get stagnant. How do you keep students coming back? Innovating, keeping things interesting for your brain and retaining students. You can do that by getting feedback. If you notice that your student is kind of like, "Meh," and you can't really think about what to do, talk with your colleagues. Find out what other people are doing. Join a consultation business group to see if you can just get out of the rut. Some strategies are improving your processes, regularly update your teaching methods, go to pedagogy seminars. When I started teaching online, I bought a couple of books on teaching online. It's not the same as in person. It can be just as good and valuable and just as useful, but it's different. And so, what are strategies for that? And then, how do you engage at this point? How do you continue with more community engagement? What workshops and collaborations can you do? And then finally, renewal. Oh boy, this one, it's a make it or break it situation. And it's one where when you've been kind of like in the zone and just kind of like coasting, this one's pretty tough. This one's pretty tough. So, if you adapt and evolve, you can reinvigorate growth, or let's say you're full and you're big enough, you can continue getting new students to account for that attrition as the students leave. And really, without innovation and adaptation, you're going to face reduced revenue, student drop-offs, and increased competition. People are going to go elsewhere. And so I want to encourage you to just embrace the renewal. Adapting to change and overcoming some of these challenges is really hard. So rebranding can be really exciting. Talk about some strategic planning. What that means is like thinking about long-term, create a business plan. This is like a perfect time to actually write a business plan. If you are in the United States, we have free resources for small businesses at the Small Business Administration. You don't even have to talk to a counselor there, even though it's free, you could. But you can go on, and on the Small Business Association, they have how to write a business plan, 10-step approach for writing a business plan. And I encourage you to imagine the next 5 years, maybe even the next 10 years. That's your strategic planning. What are some potential challenges and what opportunities are there as you go forward? All right. We're going to talk about what resistance might be coming up for you around change. You might have some fear of the unknown. We are wired to seek patterns, predictability, and uncertainty can create anxiety and making the idea of change really daunting. I'm with you. For example, you might, like I did, hesitate to adopt new software for lesson management or scheduling because you don't really know how it's going to impact your workflow. When I decided to move to an online calendar, I was like, it's too hard for me to type it into my phone. I don't always have my computer. And I tell you what, I had a bunch of mistakes. It really disrupted my workflow. It sucked. And about 3 weeks in, it was so easy to type it in. It was so easy because I just forced myself to do it. There were a lot of, it was painful. It was not helpful. But I just went for it, because you have to. I would forget my calendar. I lost my calendar one time, and I was teaching a college class. I was teaching a voice class. I was teaching private students, and I just couldn't keep track of everything. And so when I finally did that, I was able to have all my calendars all populating into one place. And so I would be surprised. Actually, I won't be surprised if anyone watching this is still using a paper calendar, because I actually just met a teacher a couple weeks ago who was like, let me pull out my calendar and write it in with my pencil. I was like, that is amazing and so old school. And you know what? If it works, it works. And also, if you're holding on to that paper calendar because you are worried, take this moment. You see that orange star right there? Pause this video and just set up an appointment in Google Calendar. Sign up for a Google account. If you are Google adverse, I actually don't have a suggestion. But if anybody has a suggestion, please email me so I can update my slides. Go to an online calendar and just set up your first appointment. Just give it a try. A lot of our fear of the unknown is because we kind of misunderstand the change. For example, you might find a new pedagogical technique, maybe a new teaching technique. You just don't see the value. What's the point of that? Why do that? Uh, it takes a lot of work to find the thing that really works for you. Sometimes, actually, what I really recommend is if you haven't taken a music lesson in a long time, I think you should go take a music lesson. See what it's like to be a student. It's it it's hard to learn an instrument. And it's even harder when you're starting to work with a teacher that is kind of a mess on the business end. And it's okay to be a mess. It's okay to be exactly right where you are. It's also really important to start thinking about how can you be more organized. I will say, you know, I have been here where I've been very comfortable in the status quo. Everything was just rolling along. It was great. I stopped doing lesson plans because I knew all my students. And then people started dropping off because you know what? I was kind of getting lazy about my teaching. I'll be honest about it. Uh, Fatal flaw. And when I realized my revenue was not quite what it needed to be to cover all of my expenses, I just had to bite the bullet. That's when I took this business class and I learned about the stages of growth and really what it means to innovate and adapt. So that is a resistance to changing. And then the fear of losing control. What if somebody hacks your account? What if you don't really understand how to use the technology? Honestly, oh, the other big one that I just remembered is like, what if you feel like, you're kind of faking it till you make it. Like there's some imposter syndrome happening. Like, oh, I don't really know how to use this technology. Somebody else is so much better at it than I am. You know what? You don't know it until you know it. And that's everybody. So if you don't try, you never will. And if you have some fear around somebody else being better, cool. Acknowledge, have that fear, and then guess what? Go learn more about it. You can do it. I believe in you. Okay. Types of resistance. Emotional. You might have fear, anxiety, it might be uncomfortable, right? Cognitive. This has more about like doubts, conflicting beliefs. Maybe you're like, I don't like for me. Okay, this is a voice teacher thing. It's not a strengths thing. Oh, actually, I think it can apply to strengths. Student really wanted to work with me because he took my community college level voice class, sings black metal. I'm like, oh no, I can't teach screaming and growling. That will hurt your vocal folds. That is so damaging. And you know what? He gets so much joy with that full body experience. I see it. And you know what? We've been working for just over a year together, screaming, growling, making all kinds of other distorted noises that when I used to hear it, I was like, I cannot condone this. But he doesn't lose his voice. I don't, when he talks normally, it sounds pretty good. And we also have a check. Like, are you screaming in a healthy way? Why don't you sing something really cleanly so we can hear the tone quality to make sure no doubt, like, I mean, probably damage is being done, because we're using the instrument. But how do we limit that? And it's been so eye-opening and heart-opening and just genre opening for me to have somebody who trusts me to help guide them in this way is amazing. So you might have conflicting beliefs about something. And then behavioral, inaction. I'm really good at this. And procrastination. I'm also really good at this. Really good. If I don't do anything, I don't have to. No, we all know that we have to do it. We want our students to practice, right? Procrastinating to the last minute. I think I said this in the beginning. I love to practice when there's a performance coming up. I am terrible at practicing when there's no performance. And when everything in my business is just kind of running, I kind of slide on my administrative tasks. So some of these types of resistance apply to administrative tasks. So understanding the why, this is how we come over our resistance, understanding why that tool is necessary. And then, maybe before introducing a new tool to your students or even trying it, paying for it, so many of these things have free trials. Sign your mom, sign your kid, sign your sibling, sign your favorite student up during the free trial and have them try it for you. Maybe offer them a free lesson for doing it. Maybe offer them, I don't know, a home baked good for helping you out, understanding the new technology that you're using. Engage your students and parents. Hey, I noticed that this seems kind of unclear. Let's talk about, how we can like make the studio policies more clear. How do we make cancellations and makeups more clear? And then implementing in stages. I am an all or nothing person. My wife and I thought, let's get 10 acres and put a cow on it. I now have 60 acres, a brand new home, 180 animals, and a huge nonprofit with employees to manage. I am not a slow goer, but I want to encourage you as I encourage myself, implement in stages. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And then communicate with your students, with your heart, knowing that it's hard to change and to adopt these new things. And see if you can be really clear about why things are changing. Help your students. They're going to have fear of change too. Help them understand how it's going to improve their process, right? Okay. Let's all take a little break. I'm going to take a drink of water. This is where I realize, oh yeah, I'm such a performer. I just love talking. I get so excited talking about these things, and I just my just whole being just is so excited for you to try some of these new things. And I hope that you'll let me know how this talk went for you, what things were missing, and what things you still want to know about. Okay. What tools are available? Well, you all know I use Acuity. It helps me with scheduling and invoicing, so booking and invoicing. It has a lot of other features that I'm currently not using that I hope to implement by the end of the year. I am really excited to start offering subscriptions so that I can move away from a one lesson at a time or group of monthly lessons in terms of invoicing to more of a subscription or tuition based. That's going to help stabilize my income so I know exactly what I'm making every single month. It's also really nice for parents and students when they just have like their set fee and they can just set it up on recurring payments. There are a lot of considerations that I have to make in terms of like, I don't do makeups, right? That's one of the reasons why I don't do makeups anymore, why I've phased that out. I always have other lessons recorded, pre-recorded, and some new, or I take their lesson time and record a lesson for them. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So Acuity for booking and billing. Calendly. I don't currently use Calendly for my voice teaching. I use it for other things, but this is another great way to do scheduling. And then Google Calendar, it's fairly new. They have an appointment schedule. And so when you go on your Google Calendar, if you click under File or like the first main menu, all the way on the left, it'll drop down and it'll say appointment schedule. I don't know if it still says beta, but it's pretty good. I've tried it out just to test it out with some people, and you can put your weekly availability in there, share it with somebody, and somebody can just book their appointment. And it's free. That's so beautiful. I love it when stuff is free. Okay. I'm curious if you use other booking or scheduling. And Kathleen, if we go through these tools and you use any of them or use different ones, chime in. Okay. Payments and invoicing. Oh, I hate asking for money. And I've even done some like therapy around this. Like, why do I not want to ask for money? I want to give everything away for free all the time. I'm a helper. I just want to do it. And really, what you bring is such a value to your student individually, the community, and society at large. And I want you to be able to keep doing that, which means I want you to get paid. And some ways of doing this, there are ways that you can be like, hi, Lori, Mira's lessons are done and I need to get paid. That's so painful for me. I'm so glad things are automated. I will do it if I have to. But QuickBooks, I use QuickBooks for my bookkeeping. It is not cheap, but it works very well for taxes at the end of the year for me. I have a couple of friends who use FreshBooks. Seems pretty similar to QuickBooks. They have gone from QuickBooks to FreshBooks because they find it easier to use. And then I use also PayPal, Venmo, Zelle. Zelle is something that goes bank to bank and there's no fees on that. Venmo also, there are no fee options. PayPal, there are no fee options. I'm not necessarily advocating that because, as businesses, we should be businesses, but I know plenty of people who use the free friends and family way. And then Stripe to take credit cards, those prices all vary. And you can send a request or an invoice through PayPal, Zelle, Stripe, FreshBooks, QuickBooks, Acuity, and some other programs. I'll mention that when we get there. And so I'm laying these out and some of their monthly prices. Almost all of these have free trials, by the way, 14-day free trials. And so I really encourage you to take the trial to make sure that it works for you and sign your friends and family up as test pilot runners or a few of your favorite students. Okay. If you use different tools and payment or invoicing processes, let me know. I used to use a Word document, and it was so painful for me to sit down and write out 35 invoices every month, and it would take hours because in my paper calendar, I would usually, if not always, cross out their name if they didn't show or canceled, or put a mark if we rescheduled or did it at a different time. And you know what? Sometimes I didn't. And it was just such a mess. Having parents come back and be like, oh, we missed that day. Why are you charging me for that day? It's not a good look. It's not a good look. And when you don't charge and then you send a bill for like 4 months of lessons, it's not a good look. I used to be like, oh, I'm a terrible business person. Guess what? With all the technologies and things that we have these days, that's cute when you're like 20. It's not a good look when you're 50. You know what I mean? So I really want to encourage you to really think about the experience that your students have and help that motivate you. Okay. Communication. I use all of these. Email, text. I have people contacting me over Facebook Messenger. Anybody have that? I do not use a Facebook group. I'm not on Facebook as a voice teacher, but you could create a Facebook group for your studio and just invite those people to your Facebook group, like a messenger group. You could have newsletters. I get newsletters from other studio teachers because I always want to know what's going on. So I sign up for everything. Social media. Maybe you have, like, my studio is Dibble Music because I got a funny last name. People think Dibble is pretty funny. So I'm Dibble Music. And so, I have a private Instagram. I have a public Instagram, but I'm thinking about making it a private Instagram just for students to post stuff, just to have a space for that where I can post stuff specifically for pedagogy and for my students as a benefit. There are a lot of really great videos and posts out there by other teachers that have different experiences than me that my students would really benefit from. So just there are all kinds of ways to communicate. The important thing is that you are consistent and that you really maintain those areas of communication. And I'll also mention here that I do have a Google Doc for every one of my students that really helps me keep track of how did they hear about me, what is their connection to any other students or parents that I know, and what are we working on? What are their goals and what are they working towards? Since we're talking about student management, here are some ways to do that. Duet used to be called My Music Teacher, and it's a program that also does scheduling, invoicing, but also student management, where you can communicate with your students, put up lesson plans, put up resources for your students. I know another one is My Music Staff that people like a lot. And a new one, very new to me. I just learned about it last week because I was looking for new things for this talk. Is called Lesson Mate. You can, I started a trial, but I haven't done a deep dive into it quite yet. But basically, it's for makeup lessons. It's an idea that I already was using Google Drive for. Because I teach exclusively online now, I'd basically just set up my Zoom. I'd run through the lesson. I have a way to share my iPad to the screen so I can handwrite music and notes and things. Email me if you want to know more about that. It's something I learned at the conservatory. But LessonMate is a way for your students to have their own account on there, and all their makeup lessons are stored on LessonMate. It looks pretty cool. I don't know for me right now if $19 a month is worth it, but it might be. It might be easier to access. And then I don't have to fill up my Google Drive storage space with these videos, makeup lessons. So it actually might be worth it. We'll see. If you're curious about it, check back in with me via email or text me, and I'll tell you how I did. Okay. So I'm curious, kind of think about what student management stuff you use. In my lesson, I still write things down in a notebook and then I transfer it over. If I can get used to taking notes on my iPad, I'll just put it right into their doc. That's something I'm going to be working towards. Speaking of documents and cloud storage, Google Drive, they have a free like terabyte for all Google users. Dropbox, I used to use Dropbox a lot. I would pay for that, but they also have a free version. And then for those that are Google adverse, there's OneDrive, which is a Microsoft product. So that's for your kind of cloud storage and documents. When I use my Google Drive, I share that folder with my students, so they always have access to it. And it's where I put all of their lesson materials. And then marketing and clients. I have a Canva, I pay for Canva now, but I have had free Canva in the past. Canva is a graphics program so that you can like upload your logo and make cool things, templates or flyers, or what else have I made for my studio in Canva? Certificates of completion for recitals, programs for recitals. I've also done like how to set up your Zoom, a more interactive with pictures and things. So I use Canva a lot for my nonprofit animal sanctuary. It's really user-friendly. It's really cool. In the past, I have used MailChimp to send out newsletters or what's happening in the studio. I'm not currently doing that, but I think they have a free trial. And then advertising, Facebook and Google Ads. Many years ago, I went through the Yelp rabbit hole and realized that Yelp is super great for businesses that need a lot of foot traffic. As studio, especially one-on-one, not multi-teacher studios, but single teacher studios, we don't need a lot of foot traffic. We need a lot of repeat business. We need our customers or our students to keep signing up for lessons. And Yelp is really geared towards increasing foot traffic. So having a store and you want, 1,000 customers a day. Yelp is really good at that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But Google Ads has been really helpful for me. And I know other people use Facebook ads, and you can spend as much as you want on that. What I would say about that is think about how much of your income you want to spend on marketing, and it shouldn't be very much. I think a lot of business minded people have a certain percentage. I can't think of what it is right now, but of your total income, there are standards for how much to spend on marketing. So keep that in mind. And then we're going to talk about I'm just going to mention here some lesson planning and performance tracking tools. Right now for lesson planning, I just use a Google Doc, but I know other groups that have used Notion, Evernote, or Trello as a place for students to go and kind of get information. I currently have student progress templates just kind of laid out in my Google Doc for them, but you might consider a survey or feedback form. I remember when I was a young teacher, I really didn't want parents in on the lessons. And I realized at one point that it was really a fear of being judged, or like I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that is a really common fear about getting feedback. I want to encourage you to embrace the feedback, embrace the fear that what you're doing is not going to work for everyone. Okay, it doesn't need to. I mentioned ideal clients. Your ideal client is going to want to give you feedback that is useful and constructive. And they're going to want to be helpful. They're going to want to lift you up the way you are going to want to lift them up in their music playing and their performing and their skill development. Really think about, how are these tools going to integrate into what you're currently doing? Make sure you understand there's going to be training period for you and your students or parents who will be using them, and really take advantage of their trial periods. Okay. So now that we've talked about tools, I'm going to talk about studio policies. Our studio policies are really important. They show our professionalism, that we're serious about our business. And if we're serious about our business, then we're serious about our students. It really helps us be consistent. Remember, our brains are hardwired for consistency and predictability. And we want our students and parents to feel comfortable with what we're doing. We need to be efficient. Let's be real. Like, we enjoy teaching. We enjoy seeing our students thrive and grow. And so if we can be more efficient on the administrative side, then we can definitely pay more attention to the artistic, creative side of teaching. And also setting expectations is really important. When was the last time your policies were updated? I'm currently updating mine right now because I am currently in that renewal phase of my business. And so, your policies are really like a document to help address any disputes, right? Your student didn't show and you have a 72-hour cancellation policy because you can fill that with another student. And they're like, "Oh, but I'm really sick." And you're like, "I'm so sorry to hear that. I have a 72-hour cancellation policy. It's in, here it is." And your ideal client is not going to bat an eye, but not all of our students are our ideal clients. So this is really a way of protecting you and your values. And I really want to encourage you to stay true to those things. You can always say, "Okay, just this one time." Fine. You can always do that. And you can always say later, maybe 72 hours isn't right. I need a 2-week cancel. No, just kidding. I want, 36 hours or, whatever. Or I don't want makeups, there is no cancellations. So however you want to set it up, it's really important for your students to know what those are. What should your policies include? Now, there may be more than this, but at a minimum, it should just say a little something about you. For example, my mission is to foster a love of music while providing a high quality instruction. Just who are you? Really quick. And then something about your lesson scheduling, cancellations, or makeups. Your payment policies. How do you want to be paid? Online, a check. Does anybody get checks anymore? When do you want to get paid? At the beginning of the month, at the end of the month, each lesson. That's easier, but it's not always convenient for people. Attendance and punctuality. If you have somebody who keeps showing late, for me, that's just part of their lesson, but they have to update their Zoom. I tell them in my reminders, like, make sure your Zoom is updated. Please check in on your Zoom the day before. It's just part of their lesson time. But you might have different values around that, whatever it is, it should be put on there. How about behavioral expectations? This is a big one for me because I love working with those emotional teenagers that their brain is developing and making them kind of unpleasant at times, but I work online, right? So they can still be in the comfort of their own home. But I remember one time I was teaching out of my home, and Macy came in and she laid right down on the couch. It was after school. And I was like, "Cool. Seems like you might not want to sing today." She was just so exhausted. And I mean, I remember, she's 15, puberty. It's so hard. It is. It's really hard. And also sometimes you got to push through. And so I had to be like, I think we might have to change your lesson time. This is like not a good lesson time for you. Or we need to start our lesson taking a walk outside, and then we'll come in and do something. Or just sing your favorite song. We're not even going to do a warm up. Just sing something, karaoke time to start. Whatever it is, what are your expectations? What materials do you want them to have? Now, I teach piano and voice. I have a piano. Voice people bring their voices with them. Do you ever have people forgetting their instruments at home or not having them? And then if that's the case, do you have an extra one? Do you want them playing your instrument? I don't know. I don't know all the particulars about that. But making sure that in your policies, it has those expectations. It would drive me crazy. Kids wouldn't bring their piano books because or their notebooks where I'd write their assignments. Drive the bananas. I don't have that problem anymore because I post all their practice expectations and their lesson stuff online now. I would do that if I taught in person. I'd be like, you don't even need to bring your book. I got a book here. I had to have all the books. And then in your studio policies, how do you want to be communicated? And don't just say, oh, just email me or just text me. Also think about what time frame you're going to respond. This is something I really struggle with, especially now that I'm really busy with this nonprofit. Responding right away, Kathleen, I think you experienced this in the beginning when we were setting up this seminar. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I just got this email. I'm going to respond to that tonight. And then tonight comes and I have forgotten all about it. You should see my phone. It's like nothing but reminders like, hey, Siri, set an alarm at 5 o'clock. Oh my gosh, it's doing it right now. Said, respond to Kathleen, you know? And I just, oh, it says it won't set it right now, but it went into my earphones. But how can you, oh gosh, I've just totally messed up my whole screen sharing. Let me reset that. I shouldn't have pulled up Siri. Haha. Technology. I'm going to pull back up my slides. So, what kind of technologies do you have that will, what kind of communication, let me refocus. What kind of communication do you want so that you set the expectation for when they should expect communication back to you? And then stick with it, really maintain it. What other topics do you use? Do you have studio policies, Kathleen?
Well, I don't. I don't have a large studio.
Yeah.
I don't need to use anything yet, but if it were to grow, then I would. And
Yeah.
but for me, the sickness, I have a student that's quite physically active in skiing and basketball, and he's just had several injuries that have gotten him off cello for long periods of time. So then what are your policies?
Right.
Suddenly you're missing a student for like a month or 3 months while they're waiting
Yeah.
for their finger to heal or for their collarbone to heal.
Right. And so spending some time thinking about how can you still be a value to them as a music teacher? What are some skills that are like not playing? And it might be hard to figure it out. And you might have to, as you said, take a break. I've certainly had to take breaks too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So setting kind of what the expectation in your mind is around that, whether you have them written down or not, maybe when you do grow, if you want to, and then you want to have studio policies, you can come back to this
Yeah.
and write some.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good point, right? Because, getting sick and not being able to sing doesn't last as long as a collarbone, hand, leg. I mean, cello, you still have to be able to sit upright and, hold your instrument.
Exactly. And then how many of the times when they're just not feeling well, is it true, or is it just a way to get out of a lesson? So if you make a special policy about sickness, the family might use that as a way to get out of a lesson if they forgot, or if they just don't want to have to drive through the
Yeah.
traffic, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe like
I
sick days, like you can allow a year or something.
I
But
think that's a great idea.
like that, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a really great idea. So really setting, this is like setting boundaries. And
Yeah,
setting boundaries can be painful, and not always comfortable.
yeah.
Especially when you have a student that you know for a long time and you have like a kind of a deep relationship, they
Mhm.
might not know why they have to pay attention to these boundaries,
But
but
you were saying if you charge tuition instead of charging by class, then you can say, well, at the end of the month, if this was your sick day, then I'll refund. It's a refund.
sure,
And
you
it's a
can
good,
do. Absolutely.
instead of asking for a payment for a class where they didn't come, or I like your idea of the makeup, recording a video, like you say. Yeah.
Yeah, during their lesson time, and I have kind of worked out some ideas for, this kind of a makeup for students,
Yeah.
depending on, kind of what their goals are. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that all takes time, right? Sitting down and thinking about it ahead in the eventuality that it might happen. But
Exactly.
you can predict, especially like with this particular student, if they did have an injury, how could you still be useful? You
Yeah.
know?
And have classes on theory. I mean, we could have done that, but
Absolutely.
we didn't.
No, and right, and sometimes I don't either, right? So this all has to work like with what you have
Yeah.
available, especially if you have a busy family life,
Yeah.
maybe you don't have that theory lesson kind of ready to go.
Exactly. It's new skills that you have to teach or whatever. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna mute again.
Okay, thanks. I found this online when I was just like looking up studio policies. It's kind of cute. It says treble clef down the side, tuition, rundown of the value of your customer. That's kind of like my mission statement, which is like we, foster a love of music while offering a high level of instruction. Expectations of the student, books and fees, liability waiver. I don't teach in person, but I when I did, I definitely had a general liability insurance, and so it's really important that you have insurance if you're teaching in person. Your rental or homeowners insurance may require that. So if this is news to you, check it out. You wouldn't want somebody to fall and hit their head on the way in or out of your studio space. Exchange of money, another way of saying billing and payments, electronic cancellations. Have you thought about this? How would you like departures from your studio to happen? People might just drop off and ghost you and never communicate with you again. If you want a different process to happen, like one more lesson or like feedback or a survey to happen when they leave the studio, put this in your studio policy so that you know how you want to end relationships. Beginning relationships, not just music student ones, but just in life, and how you end relationships, it's really important emotionally and mentally for mental health. And so I want you to think about how you might like your students to leave your studio. Talk about electronic communications and financial paperwork. Maybe that's more about invoicing. And then I also found this piano lessons contract, which I like a lot. Teacher responsibilities, kind of what parents and students can expect from you. Parent responsibilities, what can be expected of the parent, and student responsibilities. And you see at the bottom, everybody signs it. And this is from the Jennifer Boster Teaching Studio. And I think it's pretty good. It's piano. I think a lot of these things could apply to string teachers and to me as a voice teacher. Do my part to help each student succeed in reaching their musical goals, provide a professional studio environment free from distractions. A couple of the parent ones are, get my child two scheduled lessons on time. Hello. Provide child with a real well-tuned piano for daily practice. or just make sure that the parent is sitting or helping the student get to practice. I had a parent tell me once that they were not going to remind or tell their child to practice because they didn't want to be that nagging parent. And so we had to figure out other ways to motivate and get that student to practice that executive function, that way of coming into taking responsibility for practicing. And I created a whole reward system around that, and it really had to change as they got older. Stickers were not quite enough when they were 14. I think we moved to more gift certificate type reward system, and the parent actually funded that. All of these technologies, these are all wrapped up into my fees to the students, right? This is part of my lesson rate. My lesson rate is not like $2 a minute for 40 minutes. My lesson rate is, whatever per minute kind of works out that includes all of these technologies. And then student responsibilities. You can pause the video and read this contract if you like. Okay. Finally, how to write them. Be clear, keep it simple. This is perfect for me because I hate writing. So I get to use all the bullet points. See how inclusive you can make it. Some students, like I said, get a little tie during that lesson time. Maybe you have to be flexible and reschedule. So make sure that there's some flexibility for inclusivity. Get feedback on your policies, either from your colleagues, your family. Just say, hey, as a objective person, read this through, or with your students that you trust. Work really hard to be consistent, and see how you want to address issues like cancellation, ghosting, non-payment. Those things are really important. Or, as you said, Kathleen, like long-term absences. How do you want to treat that? And then where are you going to display these? I always send them out. I have them on my website. And if you have something like my music staff or duet, it would be in the student parent portal. You might, if you teach in person, actually hand it to them on the first day and then have them sign it, that they read it. All right. This is where I'd say we're going to review right now and address any other questions you may have. So we talked about understanding the need for streamlining, efficiency and consistency, and really building a foundation for your teaching and for doing really what you want. We identified some challenges or pain points to help reduce repetitive or frustrating or hard emotional tasks. For me, that would be like asking for money. Assessing your current standard operating procedures. Maybe you don't have any. Maybe you have 5 students and it's just fine and that's perfect for you and your life, and you don't need to have like a standard operating practice. Great. Awesome. Yay. Also, as you start to grow, you might find that you need some of these tools. So you'll have to map out your current existing processes and make sure that they really work for you. Streamlining strategies. So simplify, automate tasks using tools and templates. Implementing those changes, not like me, all in one go. Take it slow. Do it in phases. And then, when you adopt those for yourself, help your students and parents understand how to adopt them too. Some action steps would be, setting priorities. What's the most important, most frustrating thing, right? Create an action plan. Make a list, a flow chart of steps that you think you might need to take. Seek support. Reach out to your colleagues. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this stuff. I think you can see how excited I am. And honestly, your reaching out to me to ask me about it is actually motivating for me to keep doing it. You know what I mean? And then monitor your progress. Check in with your students and parents. Check in with your colleagues to see what new stuff. I'm going to check out that lesson mate thing because that's really new to me. Streamlining your business is not a one-time process. It's an ongoing process. I've been teaching for 30 years. I'm currently doing this right now. Okay, so it's not one time. It's an ongoing exercise. Continuously finding ways to make your operations more efficient, more effective, really allows you to focus on the things that you love, the things that I love, like teaching, inspiring, creating, a better world. If I'm going to get all like lofty about it, you know, all the changes that you make are aimed at enhancing your overall experience and that of your students. And investing time and streamlining really sets you up for a more organized, enjoyable, and successful teaching experience. So, here are the action steps. I didn't go to the next slide. Setting priorities, creating your action plan, seeking support, monitoring your progress. I really want to thank you for watching my talk. This is my email. Email me anytime. My animal rescue, if you're interested in that. I think, Kathleen, at the very beginning, before we started, you're like, do you have doves? And in fact, I have pigeons in the house, special needs pigeons, one really old pigeon and one who actually broke her leg. But I also have a chicken in the house. I got a couple roosters right around. There's a lot of shenanigans going on. So if you want to know more, please follow me on social media, Herd and Flock Animal Sanctuary. That's me down there with my chickens. We had a photographer come out and she wanted a tour, and as payment for our tour and hanging out, she gave us a bunch of beautiful pictures. And if you're looking for a business coach, someone that I have worked with who has just made such a huge difference for me is Michelle Markwort DeVoe. She's in Northern California. She lives in the Sacramento area, but she does a lot of online stuff and coaching. And the studio teacher group that I belong to is the Speak Easy Cooperative. I think right now, monthly fees for being in that consultation group is about $70 a month. And it has been absolutely life-changing for me to work with other people who understand the struggles, other creatives who are trying to run a business. It is not easy. I do a lot of avoiding, a lot of procrastinating, but I continuously try to come back to what's important. And if you need help, if you want to set up a work study session where you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing, I'd be super into that. All right. That's it for me. I wish you all my best.
Thank you so much for your time and for your organization. This has been fantastic. And I think it'll be a huge resource. I think I'll be going back and forth trying to find your slides and referencing them. So.
And I know I sent you a PDF. If anybody else wants a PDF of the slides, I'm happy to email it. Just email me, or you can just post it somewhere.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much, Meghan.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Sure.